Cześć, dzień dobry, it's me again. We are currently in a control room. And as you can see, you will not find any console in our studio. And you might ask, why? And this is actually a pretty good question, which I'm gonna try to answer in this episode. And I also will try to show you guys which gear we are using in our studio, which outboard gear we are using and why we chose to use this particular gear. Okay, I believe I haven't tried this official professional angle yet, so welcome to the Nebula studio, and of course consider subscribing. The first thing is actually a really pragmatic and down-to-earth thing. This thing is a budget. We haven't really considered buying a console. $500,000 investment, which you are never sure if you're gonna recoup. So instead of that, we decided to build our gear piece by piece. It's really simple because we have a system which was developed by API. It just allows the smaller recording studios to build the gear collection just one piece at the time. That's what we did. The second reason is actually the fact that we are living in the 21st century. 99% of the albums are being mixed in the box. We really use high-end gear for the recording. We really care about the tone, the quality of the sound. We only use the gear to record the tracks, and then we put it into our DAW, and then we work with this recorded tracks. So we actually don't have to use the console to put the tracks back to the console to mix it and then sum it and then print it as a mixed track. So actually, how do we do it? We chose the system which was invented by the API company, and it's called API 500, which is pretty common, pretty popular. You will see it in almost every recording studio, also with the recording studios which are actually using the mixing consoles. It's an additional gear, and you might ask, why use additional gear when you have a console? Let me explain. Okay, so API 500 system looks like that. This piece of gear, which is actually behind all these devices, it's called launch box. We actually use 3 launch boxes. Each of them can handle 10 different devices, 10 different slots. 2 of them are heritage audio, and on this side we have a NIF launch box which handles all of our EQ. We first bought 8 channels of preamps from the American brand Cappy. It's a direct copy of API with some twists which make them sound even better, I've heard, than the original API. Then we added 8 more channels of NIF from the French company Sound Sculpture. Then we added 2 more tube preamps, which sounds amazing. And at the end we added 2 more kind of SSL sounding Herbal Audio preamps, which are also awesome, for example, for the overhead. And this is the beauty of it. We know how many preamps we actually need. We actually know how many and which kind of a preamps we would prefer for recording guitar or bass or vocals or whatever. And when you have a console, you just need to stick to that one tone which the console provides. Or you can add additional gear, which I mentioned before. You basically add additional cost. Of course, as with every gear, you might do some compromises. You might buy some cheap modules, some cheap gear, which will not sound as good as the, old analog console. But we in our Nebula studio, we don't do that. We collect our gear really slow, and we only choose the finest gear which we can buy at certain moment. So as you could already see on the left side, we do have the preamp section. It's 28 channels of pure preamp power. And on the right side, and also in this right rack there, we do have other devices. Let's start with this upper line, which obviously, as you can see, it's our EQ section. The philosophy behind it, it's basically the same as with the preamps. Because we wanted to do it one by one, we didn't want to rush with all the gear. We first wanted to know our gear. learn it and then buy more. So first we started with the preamps, but then when the time came, we decided, okay, it's time for some EQ, especially for the drums, because drums obviously takes a lot of inputs, 12 to 22, sometimes 24 even, and we felt that a little bit of EQ on some of the channels might be useful. We started with Neve. It's also this French company, it's a sound sculpture, and they sound amazing. You can really do a really huge movement and it still sounds musical, so I highly recommend it. Then we find out that one of the colleagues is selling SSL EQs. We decided to give it a shot and we bought 2 used SSL channels. They needed a bit of cleaning, but they are super pristine. We use it mostly on overheads, sometimes on vocals. For me it's amazing to cut the things actually, and also to boost some high frequencies. I don't know, open the vocals or open the sound of the overheads. And last year we decided to fill up the remaining 4 free slots in our Rupert Neve lunchbox and fill it with copy EQs, which are super aggressive. I use it on kick, on snare. I prefer it on the sources which have a really fast transient. You know, we record mostly rock and roll here or metal, so it just suits the vibe. Okay, so when you think about mixing, the first tools which you will probably mention is EQ and compression. And during the tracking phase, the compression also is super important. That's why we decided to invest into some serious compression gear. Let me show you. Okay, definitely the most expensive one is this BAE. It's a single channel, especially on aggressive vocals. It's super sweet sounding. These 2 you definitely recognize. This is of course a mighty distressor. It sounds amazing. If I could just take one kind of a compressor with me and leave the building, I would choose the distressor, because basically it can mimic all the other compressor here. The big black compressors are of course 1176, probably one of the most iconic compressors. These are actually from Herbal Audio. It's the same philosophy, you just do it yourself basically with the parts they provide, but these parts are high end, so the sound at the end is also high end. And what do we have here on this right rack? This wooden thing is a Spanish company, Tierra Audio, and it's a VCA compressor. It should be quite similar to like a SSL one. We use it on a mix bus or on overheads or anything which actually works in stereo. Of course you can use it also in mono, it's not a problem. It should be used mostly as a really subtle compressor, so we try not to reduce more than 3, 4, 5 dB. And just in case, I'm a bit sorry for the mess in the control room. We are currently writing new stuff with Ties from Nebula, you know, the band I'm playing in. We are preparing the new album, so yeah, it's a creative mess at this moment, so yeah, please understand. So how does it feel to work in a studio which doesn't actually have a console in it? Actually, it feels really awesome. I don't see any problems in our workflow. Of course, if you are planning to run like a super high budget, huge recording studio, and you plan also mix in analog, in this case, I would recommend get yourself a mixing desk, a mixing console. Also, there are hidden additional costs of running a console. Actually, I have a friend who runs this kind of a studio with a huge API console. You know what is funny? In the control room there have to be a certain temperature all the time, so the amount of money he spends to run the AC at the certain temperature, and it also needs to be a really high quality AC, and he spends a lot of money because of that, only for the AC for the console. So it's crazy. I've been in this kind of a recording studios which do have consoles. I recorded albums with my band Ties from Nebula, and then we moved to our own studio. We started recording albums here, and do I feel the difference besides the different sound of the live room which we have here? Actually, not really. Also, as a mixer, as a person who mixes music for other people, I sometimes get the tracks from the studio where I know that there is a console there. And do I feel the difference? Not really. It's mostly about the tone which you get, tone of the vocals, the tone of the drums, how well they were tuned, which mics they use. I would say maybe there is a difference, 2-3% difference. I don't notice the difference. If you do, that's fine with me. Do you really need a mixing console? I wouldn't say so.